I feel like critical race theory is trying to transplant an American narrative onto Canada's history that just doesn't square with the facts. I'm not saying we were, Wakanda or anything, but I just don't think we were an evil racist society that is being transposed here.
Yeah, you're very right. Martin Luther King Jr. He visited Toronto in the I think it was '65, and he talked about how when the slaves, the American slaves, would sing about heaven, they were really singing about Canada, right? And that's in the '60s. And he is saying that Canada has always been a beacon of hope and freedom for a lot of Black people. But at the same time, and see, this is the thing about critical race theory. Critical race theory only use America's history with racism and slavery as just a context, as a way to manipulate people into buying into their idea. It's not really a response or a reaction to slavery. It's really actually a rejection of the civil rights movement, right? Which is why critical race theorists oftentimes talk about how much they hate race neutrality or color blindness. It's because they're not really trying to address America's history. They're trying to reject America's founding principles, which also includes Canada's founding principles as well. So they're not trying to necessarily bring an American issue into Canada, although that's true to a certain extent. The real issue is they're trying to reject Western values. They're trying to reject our love for equality under the law and to establish equity, which is, of course, communism or socialism.
Huh. That's a great observation. Thank you for that. A few weeks ago, I went through a court case where an Ontario court ruled that requiring teachers to pass a certain math exam was racist because there was a slightly higher percentage of Black people who failed the exam than white people. I think 90% of white people passed the exam and 70% of Black teachers passed the exam. By the way, you could take the exam again. So just because you failed it, you weren't shut out. And I mean, that is a difference. I don't want to focus on that difference other than that difference. The judge said, well, this math test is therefore racist, so we're going to abolish it. And I just felt like that was done in the name of anti-racism. But you could say that was done in the name of racism. It's like that Ryan Long comedy sketch where the racist and the wokeist are saying the same things. The underlying logic of that is Black people can't pass this exam, so we have to abolish it. The first part of that sentence could be said by a KKKer.
Absolutely. One of the most popular, actually, I would say the second most popular critical race theory book, right behind White Fragility, is How to Be an Anti-Racist by Ibram Kendi. Now, I think the better title, and I wrote a review of the book on my blog, and I called it How to Be a Racist. That's really what the book is asking people to do. And in the book, he says this, that racial discrimination is only wrong if it leads to racial inequity. But racial discrimination is good if it leads to racial equity. What he's saying there is racism is good. Racism against white people is good if it will lead to racial parity or equality of outcome. But it's only bad if it's leading to inequity or to racial disparities. So being anti-racist or being a critical race theorist really means to be showing partiality or to be discriminating against certain people who are considered privileged, which would be white people or also Asians, because they call Asians white adjacents, because they believe that since they are privileged, that they are benefiting from this white system in the West.
Yeah, I read that court case, and by the way, they were silent on Asian Canadians who did well under that math test. I want to ask you, how is this trickling down into the actual classroom? Because I mentioned the teacher's math aptitude test, and we know some examples from the States. I know your blog has gone through it. Can you give some examples of how in Canada this critical race theory is being taught to kids? Do you have any examples?
Well, for kids, I just mentioned Ibram Kendi, right? Ibram Kendi, he has a kids version of his book. And now when I say a kids version, I mean to kindergarten. And in Peel region, and including most Ontario schools actually, the kids version of his book is called the anti-racist baby. And it's being read. I've read. I have some internal documents from teachers sending to me what they're being instructed to teach kids, and they're being told to read out this book book to kids. And the book basically says that if you are a baby, you are bred either to be an anti-racist or to be a racist, right? So this book is really manipulating kindergarten children in Ontario and across Canada to be adopting anti-racist or critical race theory thinking. And just to show you how far this goes.
That's an excerpt from my daily show, The Ezra Levant Show. Every day I do a monologue on the news of the day, then I interview an interesting guest, and then I read my hate mail. You gotta subscribe. Go to rebelnews.com.